Hey, what's up, horror fans? This is Pete from the Lasser Cast, where we talk about all of the new streaming horror movies and TV shows, but we also cover classic horror films. This time around, we are covering the works of Wes Craven that don't include the Scream franchise or the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. So, all of his other films, which there are many that you've probably heard of, and some that are maybe not as popular, and then some that are really, play a big role in your heart. I know for this movie, my co-host over there, Danny, is a big fan of The People Under the Stairs. Danny, did you see The People Under the Stairs when it came out in theaters?
No, I didn't see it in theaters. You have it up in the background. The thing that attracted me right away to this movie was the poster art. This was like a video store staple. The movie came out in '91, so we were 9,
Right.
and I, at 9, I wasn't going to the movies to see horror movies yet, but I was, running up and down the aisles of the video store looking for boxes that had, artwork that attracted me and like made me want to see these movies. And like that poster with like the big Charlotte looked at it and said it kind of reminded her of the Fright Night poster, where like
Mm-hmm.
instead of the vampire hovering over the house, it's like this just skull hovering over the house. And like the tagline was something like, there's that one house in every neighborhood that no child likes to walk past. And I was like, oh shit, this is going to be a crazy haunted house movie. And it is, in a weird way, a crazy haunted house movie, but also it's not. I read a review on IMDb that called this Home Alone for adults. And when I read that, my first thought was, oh my God, this is a horror movie version of Home Alone for adults. And it kind of made me laugh and go, yeah, that works. But I would say I think I saw this for the first time probably very young, probably around maybe 10 or 11. But I didn't really get any of like the subtext, or not even really subtext, text as to what the story is really about. I just, like, for me, the movie started when Leroy and Fool enter the house.
Yes.
And from that moment on, it's just like everything's going crazy. You're just like, what the hell is going on? You don't know whether to laugh or to be scared. Sometimes you're doing both at the same time. And I really liked how frenetic and energetic the movie is from the time they get into the house. When I got older and I started rewatching it, that's when I really started to appreciate a lot of the other stuff in it, the subtext about what this movie is really about. And I started to appreciate the performances even more. It is, you said it's one of my favorite Wes Craven movies. I think it is probably my favorite like beginning to end Wes Craven movie.
Wow.
Obviously, my feelings towards the Freddy character and the Nightmare on Elm Street movies speak for themselves. I credit Freddy with getting me into horror. So I love New Nightmare. I love the original, of course. I love Scream, and at least most of the Scream sequels. Craven's done some other really cool movies that I like, but beginning to end, this just is my favorite Wes Craven movie.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So I should probably preface this with like how many Wes Craven movies I've seen besides the Nightmare films and the Scream films. I've only seen The Last House on the Left, this movie, and The Serpent and the Rainbow. I think I've seen a little bit of Vampire in Brooklyn, but not the whole thing. And maybe like a clip from Music from the Heart, which I don't think we're going to be discussing on this channel. But I love the fact that you brought up that someone said it was Home Alone for adults. And it makes me think, because you said you saw it at a really young age too, that it is kind of like gateway horror, except that there's a little bit of subject matter that's like, okay, maybe a kid shouldn't be hearing this. And then there's some crazy gore at one point, and then like just the kind of the stuff between the two siblings is really fucking weird. But
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that they barely touch on.
right,
That so I don't know if you knew this. I'm sure you did. You always do research for these movies, but when Wes Craven died in 2015, they were in the process of developing a People Under the Stairs TV series. And rewatching this now, rewatching it last night and thinking like there could have been so much to delve into. Like just one scene I'll throw out there. There's a scene, you brought up the gore. There's a scene where Daddy, or Man, as he's known in the credits, Everett McGill is like shredding the body of Leroy in the basement. And he turns around and his mouth is covered in blood in the sense that, oh, he's also a cannibal.
right,
And he's throwing the body parts to the people under the stairs. But you're never hinted anywhere else in the movie that him and the mom, or man and woman, are cannibals. It's just that one, like, he turns around, mouth covered in blood, and you almost got the idea that maybe Everett McGill just did that on his own.
right.
Or like maybe Wes Craven said, "Hey Everett, just smear some blood on your mouth. Really make it more, somehow be more fucked up as a character." And like that's never brought up again.
Right.
And so like if there had been a TV show, would they have delved into the cannibalism aspect of it? We cover Yellow Jackets on this show. We love on this YouTube channel. We love a little bit of cannibalism now and then.
Yes.
In fact, we complained there wasn't enough cannibalism in Yellow Jackets. So like that, when you said that, that was like the first thing that popped into my head was like, I'd love to know more about the cannibalism of these two people.
Yes. I mean, this movie is a movie that is worthy of like being remade into a TV show or another movie, because you could just flesh it out and go into more detail. Speaking of the research that you mentioned before, if you just do a simple, Wikipedia search, it tells you that Wes Craven was inspired by a true story, that there were these two burglars that broke into a house in California, and they discovered that there was this family that was keeping their two children like hidden away, like in this house, just like the daughter in this movie. And obviously they kind of embellished upon that. But it's funny, like after watching The People Under the Stairs, I watched Good Time by the Safdie brothers. Have you seen that movie?
I've seen parts of it. I've seen Uncut Gems by the Safdie brothers. So
right.
Yeah.
And
Good
I was
Time.
just
Good Time was like the first movie that Pattinson did that everybody went, oh, he's much more than just sparkly vampire guy.
Right, exactly. I bring up the Safdie brothers because I was listening to some of their behind the scenes stuff, and they were saying that when they make movies, they like to take true events and kind of weave it in with fictional events to kind of it seems to make a stronger story, or like it seems more realistic. And I think that's maybe Wes Craven's MO too, right? Because I know that for the original Nightmare, he was inspired by a real life story where a kid was trying not to go to sleep, right?
I think it was in Japan, like a story out of Japan. But even like you can go back even further. The original Hills Have Eyes, it has a lore that goes back like I think hundreds of years to maybe Scotland, of like the Sawney Bean family. I'm not sure that but there was like a family of cannibals that were like picking off people that entered into their territory, and he like kind of took that story and turned it into The Hills Have Eyes.
Yeah.
You mentioned Nightmare on Elm Street. We covered Serpent in the Rainbow, which is based on like a book written by I think like an anthropologist or somebody who actually went to Haiti and witnessed some of the things. So yeah, he's got a history of doing that, of taking these like real life events and then crafting horror movies around them.
Yeah, and a lot of his stories are sort of the staple horror story where it's like a person that lives in the real world, they just have real world problems, they go somewhere else or they investigate something and they fall into this abyss of horror, right? In this case, it's the kid Poindexter, who everybody calls Fool. He's the one that's in this crazy odyssey that's within this house. But this story, you know, I've seen this story a bunch of times. I've never actually seen Wes Craven's Hills Have Eyes, but I've seen the remake. I actually love the remake a lot. And this movie, I feel like, has a lot of parallels to The Hills Have Eyes, where it's like you think you're getting into one thing, but it's like, whoa, it's way crazier and and there's fucking cannibalism, right? Brian Keene, who's like one of the bigger horror writers, right?
Athena's a big fan of him, yeah.
Yeah, and me too. He wrote a book called Urban Gothic, which is about a bunch of teenage kids that get lost, and they're in this sort of like ghetto-y kind of neighborhood. And I'm going to use the term ghetto because it's used in this movie a lot. They get lost in this ghetto-y neighborhood, and you know, your sort of lizard brain or whatever, your, you know, racial profiling part of your personality is like, oh, it's going to be this story where they're chased by gangbangers, because that's like the stereotypical thing you would expect. But then they go to this one house and it's just filled with crazy fucking mutants and inbred people. And that's, I wonder, I didn't look up the date of when that book came out, but I was like, this is very similar to The People Under the Stairs too. So I like the idea of a house that's in a neighborhood being like this fucking like, you know, gateway to hell, basically. I think that's so cool.
I like that the character later on, the older black man, I forgot his name in the movie, but he's like he's not a relative of theirs. He's like an older friend of theirs. Who
Bill Cobb's Grandpa Booker.
Yes. When when Fool escapes, that's when he goes, you know, we've known about that house. He's like, they're generations of crazy in that house. He's like, and he kind of says the tagline that's on the poster, like, my friends and I would never walk, you know, we would always cross the street when we got to that house.
Right.
And that, I love that idea. I actually looked up the house itself. It's the Thomas W. Phillips residence in LA, which has been used in many other movies, especially horror films. It was used in House 4. It was actually used in Rob Zombie's Halloween. This is a house that the house itself is a character, you know. And my favorite thing about this movie growing up, you know, I called it, I didn't call it, I quoted a review that called it Home Alone for adults. It also is very Clue-esque with the whole idea of like, in Clue, they have like secret passageways that go from like room to room.
Yeah.
And in this movie, like, Charlotte and I are watching it last night, and Charlotte's like, you know, we live in a friggin' co-op. We live on the 6th floor. I was like, yeah, sorry, Char, there is no crawl space in between the walls in our house.
Yeah.
You know, there's an elevator next to our front door.
Right.
But, like, I love that idea of, like, and that reminded me also of Candyman, the original Candyman, where it takes place in Cabrini Green, which is also a ghetto neighborhood, like this real urban apartment where there's, you know, gangbangers are there. You know, the theme of gentrification is very loud and present in both this movie and Candyman. They came out in 91 and 92.
There you go.
So that was like a really big theme in early 90s horror, it seems.
Yeah, but I'm actually so very happy that you brought up that exact point, because that's what I was kind of segue to. Like, I remember as a kid that it seemed like, oh man, there's a lot of movies about like crime and like just that word urban, like, oh, you know, there's this drug problem and it's the inner city thing that, like, I remember just on the news, that was such a big deal. And there were all these movies, even like a movie like as like sci-fi out there is like Predator 2. It's set in LA, but it's very like urban with crime and stuff like that, right? This movie, I think what really put it on its radar, besides you always mentioning it, is horror noir. Right? And horror noir has a big segment about this movie. I kept thinking, was it on In Search of Darkness? But it's 91, so obviously it's not In Search of Darkness.
It's gonna be in David Weiner's his 90s horror collaborations. Yeah.
And see, rightfully so, because it's a movie that is just perfect for being like a snapshot of its time, right? Because there's that whole commentary throughout this whole thing of, oh, you're scared of this thing that's in this house. You're scared of what's in this neighborhood. But it's really these like twisted fucking white people that are hoarding the wealth that are the scariest thing in this movie. It's not even the fucking, people that are hidden in the house that look like zombies. They're not even the
Yeah.
scary part of the movie. It's the fucking crazy white people running around in gimp suits saying burn in hell to each other all the time. Just that's like it's weird because the movie is what, like it's 91 to now, what it's like
It's
30.
disgustingly 32 years old.
Right. It's such an old film at this point, but yet it's so like topical too, right? It's like, oh, these
Yeah.
rich white people, they're the real problem.
Yeah, I mean, and we grew up in New York City, and in the 1990s, like early 90s, like the idea of, even when like I got to junior high, and probably when I was about 13 to 14, my friends and I decided we wanted to start going to the city.
Yeah.
And, this was before cell phones. And it was really like convincing my mother, especially, to let us take the train into Manhattan, even in like 94, 95, it took a lot. And like, even like by the time I got to high school, they just weren't fans of us going into the city. And, there were neighborhoods in Brooklyn when I was a kid that they were just off limits. And now they're like the most trendy upper class neighborhoods in the city because of exactly what we're talking about here. The Candyman remake does a really good job, or Requel does a good job of really hitting on the gentrification issue also, with like this very similar idea. But like, if I said to my mom, or if I said to my parents in like 1993, hey, can we like go spend the day in Williamsburg? They'd be like, absolutely not. What, are you crazy? And now it's like, now Williamsburg is the spot to be, like in Brooklyn. It's like, people go, and there's concert venues, abandoned buildings have been turned into concert venues and high-rise apartments. And it's crazy. You did bring up gimp suits, and I just want to mention Ving Rhames had a really bad couple of years with gimp suit characters.
He sure did.
Between this in 91 and then Pulp Fiction in 94.
Yeah.
Like, that poor man in gimp suits. Like, what did Ving Rhames do?
Yes. Well, I think we can kind of segue into Ving Rhames' character. I definitely want to talk about the Robesons too, and we'll put a pin in that and talk about them in a little bit too. But for Ving Rhames, okay, at the beginning of this, before we started recording, you said to me, I know there's something that you loved about this movie. And of course, you mentioned how the Robesons are played by two people from Twin Peaks that were a couple in Twin Peaks. But besides that, Ving Rhames was my favorite thing in this movie. And he's not really a likable guy. He's actually extremely condescending to Fool. He's very cynical, but he is like the biggest fucking perv. And all the best lines in the movie are just him like saying perverted things until he dies. And when he died, I was like, oh man, I was just digging like all the random fucking perverted shit he was saying. That's another reason why the movie's not exactly gateway horror, because I'd feel uncomfortable showing this movie to my 12-year-old with all the stuff that he says.
Yeah, there's a couple lines. I didn't remember so many of those lines the very sexual lines. I did love, he does have a quote in this movie that is completely not sexual at all that I fucking love. And I think it really goes with the themes of this movie. It's the scene where Fool finds him upstairs and he's laying down with his head in the vent, and Fool has just found Spencer dead. And so he thinks Leroy's dead, and Leroy turns around and goes, just because a man's lying down doesn't mean he's dead. And I think that line has so much meaning behind it, especially given that this is a character who, for all of his sexual innuendos and sexual lines, the point of them being in this house is to kind of like reclaim the wealth from these like awful landlords that are forcing Fool's family and his cancer-ridden mother out of their home because they were late on their rent by like 2 days. And, they keep talking about wanting to like tear down these apartment buildings and put up new condos. And it's like the whole idea of like reclaiming the wealth from like these just awful landlords. And this is a story that, like you mentioned earlier, this is a story that was not just important for 1991. This is still something that's going on in the city today, where you have like landlords that are, you know, you have rent control buildings where the landlords are kind of trying intentionally to let them fall apart, hoping that the people leave so that they could tear them down and build non-rent control apartments. And, you know, so that line, just because a man's lying down doesn't mean he's dead. I thought that was such a heavy line, you know, for a character who, and it gives this character, Ving Rhames' character, who kind of seems like an asshole, kind of seems like a, kind of like a pervert, you know, maybe, you know, he's probably, you know, maybe a boyfriend of Ruby, or like he's trying to, you know, get with Fool's older sister.
Yeah.
And it kind of gives him this, like, so much weight to that character in this scenario.
Yeah. He kind of represents this like cynical outlook for the situation that Fool and his family are in, right? Fool's got this, like, he's a little kid and he's optimistic about his future. At one point he says to Ving Rhames, he's like, I'm going to be a doctor. And Ving Rhames is like, you can't even pay for your mom's medical bills. How are you going to pay for college or whatever? And, you know, he just kind of represents this sort of bleak outlook. And, you know, it's weird. They go into this, this apartment in the beginning of the movie to go find Ving Rhames, and the apartment itself is actually very scary. And like you were talking before about like your parents kind of having these fears of like certain neighborhoods and stuff. And my family obviously had it too. I lived in Staten Island, and there's parts of Staten Island where you'd be like, oh, that's kind of, you don't want to go down that street, right? And this one apartment is really like something else. Like there's dogs eating food like in the middle of the hallway. There's all these people just saying weird stuff, and everybody looks like they're on drugs too. And so this movie is very much about, like you said, trying to like get out of your situation and like advance yourself. And so they try to go get these gold coins, and you know, it's Ving Rhames, this guy Spencer, and Fool, and they try to break into this house. And one thing I was kind of unclear of, because I just watched it once, I didn't go back and like review this, but essentially Spencer dies because he gets scared to death, right?
That's what they say. I mean, they even like do the effect of like, there's, what does Fool say to Ving Rhames? He goes to Leroy, he says, if you thought Spencer was white before, you should see him now.
Great
which
line.
I think is such a great line.
Yeah. I mean, he's just laying on the floor and his hair is white, you know, and so he kind of resembles the people under the stairs too. But they all go into this house thinking that they are going to find these gold coins, and then it turns out that the house itself has all these sort of defenses built in by this crazy incestuous couple. And so I think now we can talk about the Robesons. Everett McGill is like man or daddy or whatever. He's the main Robeson guy. And then there's Wendy Roby, who she's from Twin Peaks as well. I've seen Everett McGill in other things and like other David Lynch things. He's in David Lynch's Dune, where he plays like Stilgar. He's in other things too, and he's got this like real deep voice. And he can play this real stoic kind of guy. And I've only ever seen Wendy Roby in Twin Peaks, and she plays this really nuts character on Twin Peaks where she has an eye patch. At one point, I can't remember if she like falls or something. She has some kind of accident, and she like reverts to her high school age. So you have this woman who's like in her late 30s or whatever, running around like she's a high school senior, and it's just really weird. She's like flirting with high school boys, and
I would never have been able to guess that these two actors were able to play crazy.
Right. And so in the beginning of this, you mentioned how Everett McGill, you know, maybe it's possible that he just impulsively put blood on his face just to be over the top, and Wes Craven ran with it. I think that there's probably a lot of improvisation coming from both these characters, and especially like the way that they react to things. You know, like there's one part that I keep thinking about where there's a dog in the house. We haven't even talked about the dog, but the dog is in the first half of the movie, and he's chasing around Fool. And at one point, the dog's in the walls with Fool, and Everett McGill stabs him with like a bayonet. And he's like, I got him. And the way he says, I got him, it's so... Well, go ahead.
Dance, I said to... So Charlotte watched with me, and Charlotte is a 12-year-old horror fan, but she's also a 12-year-old. So she doesn't really care that the dog is like been trained to eat people. She's like, oh, look at the dog. So
Yeah.
when the dog dies in the movie, and trigger warning for people who can't deal with that, the dog gets, stabbed with this bayonet by accident. And when the dog dies, Charlotte was like, oh no, they killed the dog. And then Everett McGill starts doing that, like, oh, I got him, I got him, I got him, I got him, I got him. And she like went from like, oh no, the dog, to, oh my God, what the hell is he doing? In like that scene, like, I Everett McGill is my favorite part of this movie because he's not a very well-known actor.
No.
I cannot see anyone else in the world doing that character.
Yeah.
The mannerisms he has, the looks on his face, like where he's capable of looking menacing, confused, and stupid all at the same time.
Yes.
It is one of the most gleefully over the top performances I've ever seen in a movie.
Yes.
And him and Wendy Roby together are just perfect. They're the perfect villains in this movie.
Yes. And I think it's because they had this chemistry in Twin Peaks, and they're this weird couple in Twin Peaks.
Well, I read Wes Craven hired them because he loved them on Twin Peaks. So
yeah. There's one point in this movie, and keep in mind, this is the first time I saw this yesterday, where Fool and their daughter, right, this girl that they essentially kidnapped, they're in the like chimney of the house, and then the Wendy Roby comes into the chimney, and they drop a gun, and she's trying to get the gun, and they're trying to get the gun, and they fall on her, and then I think Fool has like his two fingers like up her nostrils, and it's just such a crazy scene. I'm just imagining filming that. That must have been so fucking uncomfortable to film. But it's like she's all in. She's all in for the physical. Everyone in this movie is in for the physical comedy, the physical stunts. It's like crazy. Like people fall down the stairs multiple times. One thing we should probably mention is that like the house itself, like you can just flip these switches and all the doors lock simultaneously. There's like compartments that open up. And then I think most notably is the stairs become like a slide essentially. And they get used on people multiple times.
And also, there's in the walls, the crawl space, like Roach, the one person under the stairs who's gotten away and lives in the walls now. He has like built this complex system where like a hole in the floor falls and like the dog slides down this like slide from the upper level down to the kitchen.
Right.
And Roach, by the way, is played by Sean Whalen. Sean Whalen has been in over 100 movies and TV shows. He has like 140 plus credits on IMDb. Most famously, you probably have seen him in Twister.
Yeah.
But more famously than that, he is the guy from the first Got Milk commercial.
Aaron Burr.
He is the Aaron Burr guy in the first ever Got Milk commercial. I was just watching a YouTube video. Oh yeah, there is my. So that picture that you just posted, that you just put up there, that is myself with Brandon Adams, Fool, Kelly Jo Minter, who plays Ruby, and who's also in Nightmare on Elm Street Part 5, Dream Child, Sean Whalen, of course, who plays Roach, and Jan Birch, who is the stair master. He's like the most prominently featured person under the stairs.
Right.
And that was from New Jersey HorrorCon and Film Festival back in 2017. I believe they're actually doing another People Under the Stairs reunion at this year's New Jersey HorrorCon,
Nice.
which I don't think I can go to because it happens to fall on a weekend where I have like 3 other things, which sucks. Yeah. But that picture is one of my all-time HorrorCon moments. I bought, like, you can see I have the poster there. They all signed it. I took individual photos with them. They're just the coolest group of people. I was upstairs at like a bar having a drink, and like Brandon Adams just happened to walk up, and I ended up like talking to Brandon Adams for like 10 minutes. And like, just like, if I love that movie so much that like they also did a Q&A. It was just really fun. I have Geeks of Doom articles that I wrote like covering that horror film festival and HorrorCon, and covering the reunion. But yeah, they were super cool. The like Yeah, so like you have Sean Whalen, who's the Got Milk guy.
Right.
He plays Roach. Charlotte loved Roach.
Of course.
And I feel like, going back to what we said way back at the beginning, you can have an episode of a TV show about Roach. Did you see, by the way, who was up for the role of Roach?
No, I did not. Who?
According to IMDb, 2-time Academy Award-winning actress Hilary Swank was up for the role of Roach.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
It was written to be non-gender, and there is a line in the movie about where Alice, the daughter, says that they were looking for the perfect boy. So I guess it does kind of make sense that they went with a male character for Roach, but that would have been something. Hilary Swank, I remember, was in the movie version of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. She plays one of like Buffy's girls in who goes to prom and gets attacked by vampires.
Yeah.
So that was around 90, 91, 92. So she was definitely acting at that point. That would have been, I wonder if her trajectory would have remained the same. If Hilary Swank is 2-time Oscar winner Hilary Swank, who started in as wall runner tongueless Roach in but
yeah, well, remember she was also in the Next Karate Kid too. That's the first time I think I ever saw her. But I totally forgot about Buffy too. Yeah,
I love Sean Whalen in this movie though. I think considering he doesn't have a tongue and he can barely talk, he emotes so well. Charlotte was like really upset when his character he does get shot and he does like save Fool numerous times. And he ends up dying, and like Charlotte was really upset. She was like, "We needed more of him. He was only in the movie for like 10 minutes."
I completely agree with Charlotte. I actually thought that exact same thing. You talked about him emoting, and he talked about his quality of acting. He's always smiling throughout the whole thing, and at one point, he's dying and smiling. And so I think that is a pretty impressive talent right there, where he's like smiling as he's dying. Danny froze up. Hopefully he's hearing what I'm saying. I will just, I guess, keep talking. I just see Danny's like frozen face. You guys that are listening just on the podcast, you're in for a real treat today, right? I showed this one picture y'all can't see, but it's basically Danny and the People Under the Stairs cast. And now Danny's frozen, and I am just talking by myself. I'm going to remove him. And I think he's going to sign back in. Probably someone called him on his cell phone. Here we go. There you go. Okay. So what was the last thing you heard me say?
He was always smiling.
Yeah, he was always smiling. And even as he's dying, he's smiling. And I just thought that was a super impressive little bout of acting there. Yeah. So why don't we talk about like that whole situation and the actual people in the house besides the Robesons, right? Because you have Roach, and then you have the daughter, and then you have the people under the stairs too. So can you kind of explain for everybody like what the fuck is going on with all those people there?
So again, when I saw the movie box, and the movie is called The People Under the Stairs, I'm thinking this is a haunted house monster movie where there are like zombie creatures that live in the basement that are going to grab anybody that walks into the house. It turns out that this family, for generations, apparently, have been kidnapping local youths looking for the perfect child. And any child who talks back, it's the hear no evil, see no evil, say no evil thing. So any child that says the wrong thing, gives a wrong look, or hears the wrong thing, basically their run as the perfect child is ended. The father, Everett McGill's character, or generations before him, will cut the tongue off of that character and throw them in the basement, and they just lock them behind this like set of walls in the basement. We hear that they give them flashlights and they feed them something. They're fed food of some kind, and they're basically forced to live in the basement in the dark. And that's it.
Yeah.
And they also have this like elaborate, like almost medieval style, like pit, like well in their basement that they dispose of their dead bodies in. So obviously, this is, going back to the cannibalism. Anybody who comes by, like the girl has these dolls upstairs.
Yeah.
And Fool's like, why are you making these dolls? And she's like, to hold the souls of all the people that have been killed. And it talks about like workmen, electricians, like anybody that's ever come by to like look at the house is like grabbed inside, killed, and fed to the people under the stairs.
Right.
And like the movie dabbles in so many things that could take the movie into a different direction. Like the movie starts with a tarot card reading. So
Yes.
you're like, oh, this could be some kind of tarot card, supernatural thing. Then you have Alice, the girl, making these dolls where they hold the souls of the, is it going to be that kind of movie? Is it going to be like, and there's a hint of cannibalism there. What kind of horror movie is this going to be? And it turns out to kind of be a little bit of, I don't want to say all of them, because there's nothing really supernatural here, but it's really just about these two crazy people and their generations of crazy family who have, made this house with this now collection. We never really see exactly how many people are in the basement. We see that there's at least 10 to 15 people under the stairs. Jan Birch's character in the credits is known as the Stair Master.
Right.
He's like the one that's shown the most. He's like the leader. He like saves Fool at one point. And then there's the one scene at the end that I remember as like a 9-year-old when I rented this. I legit screamed, where the mom is trying to stab the girl on the steps. And from out of nowhere, he comes through the stairs, like Jason Voorhees style, like, raw, and grabs her. And I just wasn't ready for that. And I was like, wah!
Yes.
And they like just burst through the walls at the end. There's a scene at the end where, getting back to like the sexual language in the movie, where Fool says to him, Stairmaster, and he goes, you can get out there, you can see the sun, you can get a woman. And I'm like,
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay, so I mean that's a thing in itself that I kind of wanted to talk about too. But I want to talk about that scene. Let's put a pin in some of Fool's dialogue too. But one thing I want to mention, that scene where the Stairmaster bursts through the stairs. Like, it's no wonder that you freaked out, because that scene is so intense. When the mom is coming after her with the blade, it really reminded me of like Carrie, and like the mom coming after Carrie. Like the acting there, where she's just swinging this knife around, and they're on the steps, and they're just both screaming. Like there's crazy kind of like abusive imagery, and like I said, this movie is extremely physical. The stuff they do to all the actors in this movie is crazy. People are always falling down steps. The mom is really, really abusive to the daughter. Like, she's always verbally saying things. She's crazy, like obsessed with what the daughter eats. And at one point, one thing that really disturbed me, I know that she didn't literally throw her into scalding water, but when they're cleaning up the blood from Ving Rhames' murder, the daughter has to clean up, and then she gets all blood on her dress, and then they stick her in this fucking tub that they make a point to show is just like steaming hot. And that really bothered me, and I think,
I'll take it even that exact scene just a tiny bit before, when she's dragging her down the steps to clean Ving Rhames' blood off the floor.
Yeah.
There's a scene at the very end of that where AJ Langer, who plays Alice, where she hits the last step, steps in the blood, and slips.
Yeah.
And you cannot tell me, like, I don't know if she wants to comment on our video, please do. That looked completely legit. That looked like they grabbed an actress, pulled her down the steps, and she slipped in liquid and just went.
Yep.
because she hits the floor hard.
Yeah.
And I'm watching that going like, oh,
Yeah.
and I'm like, that there's no way you can act that scene. Like you can't act like it, because like you've all done it, right? You've all like, to like make your daughter laugh. You've like, there's been water on the floor and you'll go like, oh, you always look like an idiot acting in that moment. But if you actually slip, it fucking hurts.
Oh, of course.
And like end up like pulling a hamstring or like bruising your ass.
Yeah.
That scene looked brutal. And then it goes from that scene to the scalding water scene. Like AJ Langer went through the ringer in this movie.
Yes. Yeah. And it's just this grueling movie. And it's kind of funny because there's not much to it. There's a ton of like subtext and stuff about inequality and class and race, but the plot is very simple. It's just like, let's break into this house to get these gold coins. Oh, there's these crazy fucking people that have this house and like are abusive to the people that live here too. It's very simple, but it's just a lot of like cat and mouse, chasing people around, grabbing people, kind of hanging them up onto something, beating up the people, getting away from them. That happens like over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And I think though that the reason why the movie works, I think the heart of the movie is Fool. I think that you said that you ran into Brandon Adams at a con. I'm actually kind of jealous because I think that he does a fucking phenomenal job in this movie.
And he was born in 1979, so he was legit 12 when this movie was made.
Mm-hmm.
And like, it's crazy to me, as we have 12-year-olds, so it's crazy to me that he's only 12 in this movie, because he's acting like it feels like he's so much older than he actually was making this. And he is like, no doubt, the main character of this movie. He's the hero of this movie. He's like a 12 to 13-year-old kid, African-American kid who is the lead like hero of this horror movie. Like, he breaks like so many stereotypes in that, like, you see just a little bit of his backstory with, I love the idea that he has this name like Poindexter, and like some people call him Dexter, but like his mom calls him Poindexter and everybody else just calls him Fool. And I love that got tied in with the tarot card reading. But he's so freaking good in this movie. He embraces all the physicality of the movie that you were saying. Like, him and Everett McGill have scenes together where he's like beating the shit out of Everett McGill. Like, countless times. It almost feels like an Evil Dead movie at points where he runs out of nowhere, punches him in the dick, smashes a lamp over his head, runs back into the wall. Like, he has scenes where he's wrestling the dog. He has scenes where he's like being grabbed by Roach into the wall. It's so crazy how much now, I don't know how much, like, how hard it was for him to film this movie, but it seems like it was such a crazy shoot for a kid his age at the time. And he just was so good in this.
Completely agree. I mentioned before how this is in horror noir, and they talk about how he's the lead in the movie, and that's a big deal. And you've mentioned multiple times that this is like Home Alone, right? It's like a Home Alone horror movie, and he is Kevin. He's the equivalent of Macaulay Culkin, who's this tremendous fucking star from that exact time period. Macaulay Culkin's just this huge, like, he's like Arnold Schwarzenegger and Macaulay Culkin are like the two big names from that time. And this kid is just as good as Macaulay Culkin in that, where he's charismatic, he's funny, he delivers his lines, he reacts to all the craziness around him in a very natural way. I mean, it's kind of crazy that he didn't end up being as big a star as you would expect, because
well, was he in, it was The Sandlot or Mighty Ducks?
Oh,
it was one of those.
The Sandlot.
Sandlot.
Well, let me just double check because I don't want to like say the wrong thing, but you're absolutely right. He's definitely in one of the, Mighty Ducks.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I
knew
he had like a
he's in the Mighty Ducks and the Sandlot.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So like he did have like a good stretch of movies after this. Those were big, like The Sandlot was a movie that I rented over and over again. Mighty Ducks was a huge hit when it came out. So like those were pretty big movies for him. But yeah, like he just killed it in this movie. My favorite line of his in the movie is when he first meets Alice and he says, "What, you never saw a brother?" And then she goes, "I never had a brother." And he goes, "No, I meant a black person." It's just like, and it's so great for both of those characters because you really get the sense of isolation that she has, but then you also get like his sense of humor from where he grew up, and like his and even like the idea of like he has a chance to like he escapes and he puts himself back into harm's way,
right?
To like there's that like real hero aspect to his character. And I'm sure that there's like parts. I'm sure that like I guess like from a horror noir standpoint, there is the idea of like, oh, you have the black hero who puts his life on the line to save like a white character, but also like the villains of this movie are these horrible white people.
Yeah.
And like with the overarching theme of like, race in the neighborhood and gentrification, and there's so much like social commentary to that aspect of the movie too.
Yeah. It's funny. I think I used the term hoarding wealth at least once or twice talking about the Robesons, and they have in the end, Fool finds their stash, and it's like fucking Smaug from the Lord of the Rings, like his.
I was
cave.
gonna say it feels like Wes Craven was like, hey, let's just have like a pirate's booty scene.
Right.
Like in the Goonies, like when they come upon One-Eyed Willie and it's like all the rich stuff is just laying there. Yeah. It's almost like a cartoon at that point where you have literal money bags on the floor, like that Scrooge McDuck would be swimming through.
Right. So over the top. And then, what's interesting is that he does this little thing where he sticks the coins in the candles and then the candles are dropping. I was not expecting that. That was really weird and interesting. And then he essentially walks Everett McGill into a trap, talking about beating up Everett McGill. And he's like, I'm going to blow you up. And, and then he literally does blow him up. But it's funny because you were talking about how these white people are horrible to this kid. They do say the N-word in this movie. And at the very end, the wife is about to say the N-word again, and then like it's just the whole group of people come right when she's about to say it, and so she's like, oh fuck at that point. But talking about horror noir, we've obviously gone 30 plus years since this movie, and this movie is closer to the time when in horror black people are the ones that are killed first, and they're never the star. They're maybe the supporting character. And this kid is the lead, and this is all about black people trying to escape from crazy white people. Obviously, times have changed, movies have changed. I mean, not as much as probably people would like, but this movie was, I think, probably extremely progressive.
Well, have you seen the trailer for the new horror movie coming out called The Blackening?
Oh, yes.
I mean, that looks amazing. It has maybe the best tagline I've ever seen.
Yeah.
One of us has to die first.
Right.
And, which is just like, talk about embracing like the tropes of horror and then really like turning it up to 11. I can't wait to see that. It comes out, I think, in early July, maybe late June, early July.
Let's definitely cover it.
Yeah, I can't wait to see that. But yeah, like you said it earlier, this movie, it holds up to something, something that has, this is a movie from 1991, and the themes of this movie hold up. And for anybody who hasn't watched it, it is streaming free on Tubi.
God bless Tubi.
Like most great movies, because Tubi is this just amazing service.
Yes.
So you could watch it on Tubi. Yes, you have to watch a few ads, but it's still good. I think I have the Blu-ray of this that came out a few years ago.
Nice.
Yeah.
God bless Tubi. God bless Screambox, because there's all these things that we're covering for the show that it's like, oh, I actually don't have to buy it on Amazon. This is nice. And so,
Yeah. So I mean, if you want to, I think we are good with People Under the Stairs. I mean, unless there's any last comments. I mean, so for the Wes Craven movies that you've seen, where
Yes.
would you rank this?
Ooh, that's a really good question. Okay, so he did Scream 1 through 3,
Four.
right?
Scream
And
1 through 4.
1 through 4. Oh fuck, that's gonna make it hard. And then obviously Nightmare on Elm Street. I did not see New Nightmare, believe it or not. Don't kill me. And then Last House on the Left. I'm not gonna put Last House on the Left pretty high on my list. It's not okay. We're not even gonna go in that direction. I have a real soft spot in my heart for Scream. So those movies would be like at the top. Maybe the first Nightmare would be on below them, and then this. And I
Okay.
think you just said that this is like your favorite one from beginning
I
to end, right?
Yeah, I mean, I love Nightmare on Elm Street. I think it kind of falls apart in the final act. So, like, obviously, if I'm looking at Wes Craven's career from what's the most historically important film, it's Nightmare on Elm Street, and then it's Scream.
Right.
But from just a pure personal, what's my favorite of his movies, I think it's this at the top, followed by probably the original Scream, and then New Nightmare and Nightmare on Elm Street. And I'll just throw in one last one, Red Eye, starring Cillian Murphy. Great movie. Really great thriller that nobody ever talks about.
I actually have seen Red Eye. If you want, we can cover that on the channel too.
Yeah, that would be cool.
I was thinking we should open it up to the comments too. Like, if you guys are watching this, let us know which non-Scream, non-Nightmare on Elm Street, Wes Craven movies you think we should cover that don't include the Serpent and the Rainbow. I'd put this above the Serpent and the Rainbow too.
Oh yeah, I think Serpent and the Rainbow has some really terrifying moments in what is otherwise a fairly flawed movie. And I think so, getting back to that whole white savior trope, I think like Wes Craven corrected a lot of the issues that people may have had with Serpent and the Rainbow.
Yeah.
Like kind of exploiting the voodoo culture, having Bill Pullman as the hero of that movie. By replacing, by flipping it, and now the hero of this movie is a young black actor, and having like the villains be these like corrosive white people, and by having like just the main themes in the background of this movie, I think he really does a lot to kind of go against a lot of the things that people might criticize about Serpent and the Rainbow.
Yeah, really, really good point. I think he'd be wise enough to do that to course correct, or like to just sort of make up for it. I mean, you've always talked very highly of this movie, and I actually really enjoyed it. It's so like zany and over the top, and just some really great performances from actors that I already kind of knew about and appreciated. So thank you for making us watch this. I'm thinking for next time around, we can maybe do the original Hills Have Eyes, but we'll talk off camera about what we're going to cover next. You guys watching at home, let us know what you think we should cover. But I was going to say that on this channel, if you do subscribe to the Lasercast, Danny's always putting up shorts and always, doing reviews. He's doing quick reviews of movies that are out in the theaters right now, things that are streaming. He and I just did a review of The Barn from 2016 and The Barn Part 2 that came out in 2022. That was another crazy, zany set of horror movies right there. A lot of fun to talk about. Also people that Danny kind of knows by tangent. But yeah, make sure you like this video, and we're going to keep this Wes Craven thing going, and we're also going to be talking about anything else that's new to Shudder and in theaters. So make sure y'all are watching the Lasercast, and we'll see you guys next week.